So what if the space between us changes us? About 15 months ago, I had a realization that absolutely gutted me. It was a major milestone moment in our family. Our only son graduated from high school and would soon be headed to university, making my husband and I empty nesters. It was the end of our most important era together, so far. Here's how I experienced it. It was as if my husband's son and I had been inside this very large fishbowl. And in that fishbowl was us and all the things that had been in the space between us. Our dynamics, our challenges, our behaviors. It was like in one of those movies where there's an art heist and they blow in smoke to reveal the until then invisible laser beams. Well, I could suddenly almost literally see the stuff that was and had been in the space between us. And my shock was the amount of bad stuff that was coming from me. You see, in my day job, I'm a facilitator and coach for work teams. And I help people with very different roles and perspectives and needs solve hard problems together. It's basically part of my job to help create great spaces, great dynamics between people so they can do great work together. But somehow, what I know and understood, I was not applying at home with the two humans for whom I care the utmost in this world. So what was I getting so wrong, and why? So what if what's in the space between us changes us? As I began to unpack this, one of the first things that I noticed was that in my 20s and early 30s, you could pretty much count on me to be easygoing and upbeat and supportive and ready to have fun. And that kind of looked like this. And then I met my husband, and we had our son. And over time, there were these new periodic moments in which you could kind of count on me to be stressed and hypervigilant and overanalyzing and fastidious about details. And that kind of looked like this. And, in those moments, I was putting a lot of not so great stuff in the space between us. Frustration, pressure, judgment, and more. So, who is this version of me, and why was she showing up? Well, what if what's in the space between us changes us? I want to first share the part that I already understood. I've asked hundreds of people to think of the best team that they were ever on, and to describe themselves and how they were being on that team. Let's call that Team A. Here's the things I hear back. Oh, Team A. I was so energized and engaged, and wow, I was open to new ideas and to other people, and I was really comfortable saying even hard things. I was proactive, I was creative, I was out there taking risks and being productive. And then I asked them to think about the worst team that they were ever on, and to describe themselves and how they were being on it. Let's call that Team B. Here are the kinds of things I hear back. On Team B, I was so disengaged. I was not open to others' ideas. I avoided saying the hard things because I couldn't trust that it would not be misinterpreted. We had so many challenges, but I avoided taking risks, or getting creative, because if things went wrong, I did not trust that they would have my back. I was less productive. So we have different versions of the same people. So now let's imagine that all the people on our team A are in a fishbowl. And what do we remember is in the space between people on that team? The things I hear are things like excitement, positivity, trust, respect, support for each other. Now let's imagine that there is a fishbowl with all the people from our team B in it. What do we notice is in the space between us? I hear things like frustrations, curveballs, distrust, disrespect. I don't respect them, they don't respect me, lack of support, no listening, no learning. So we have Team A spaces and Team A versions of us, and Team B spaces and Team B versions of us. And here's what we usually say to that. This Team A version, that's the real me. This Team B version, it's just who I'm being under the circumstances. But what about everyone else? Oh, them, that's who they really are. So what if what's in the space between us changes us? Now, as a facilitator and coach, I already knew we had different versions of ourselves in different spaces. Part of our job includes creating spaces with enough listening and trust and respect to bring out the higher versions of people, the versions that are willing and able to do great work together. But knowing and understanding this was still not changing the fact that the Team B version of me was periodically popping up at home. So here's the thing that I was not yet seeing. There is a switch, and it's inside of me. It is the I don't care switch. Let me be clear, I actually cared more than I ever had. I cared so much about doing the right, good thing that in certain moments, doing that just seemed more important than creating great space between us. So that switch kind of went from this to this. So here's how I've actually come to see that switch. When our switch is off, we're in a state of perceived safety. When our switch is turned on, we're in a state of perceived threat. Now that I was responsible for the life and upbringing of a human being, along with juggling all the important responsibilities at home and at work, there were a lot more things in the space between us that could create challenges and obstacles and stuff that would put me in a state of threat. However, what I've come to see is that this switch is not about actual threat or actual safety. We can all handle a lot of pretty intense, stressful, even dangerous things and still do it with skill and grace and even mastery of the space between us. On our Team A's, we had lots of challenges. We even have outright failures, but our switches rarely flip. Our switches flip when we go from a perception of, we've got this, to a perception, we don't have this, or I don't have this. When our switches are flipped, any skills or abilities that we might have had about creating great spaces between us are out the window. We are in a state of survival mode, perceived survival mode. We make demands, we reiterate our points over and over again, we disregard theirs, our voices get loud, or we shut down and just do it all ourselves. In those times, we put a lot of pretty unhelpful stuff in the space between us. When our switches are turned on, we only seem to be able to see the stuff that we are right about. So as far as I was concerned, I was not the problem here. So here's the part that I was not getting. We have a great ability to see what we are reacting to. We are far less great at seeing the reactions that we are causing. Our perceived threat on mode can look different. For some people it's big, for others it's small and controlled. It can be at home, it can be at work. Regardless, the space that we are creating when it is on is ironically not the space that could help the two things that we want most in those moments: agreeing and learning. So we're basically wasting our time and theirs. Space between us does not change overnight, but it can also change surprisingly fast. If, like the Team A versions of ourselves, we choose to believe the best in others. When I see businesses and organizations struggle, it's not only from the very real concrete challenges they're facing, it's also from a switch from Team A space to Team B space that can create a spiral that can be their undoing. But changing that is not a new policy. It's a new choice. In our world today, there are already so many challenges in the space between all of us that unless we are intentional about it, the space between us can go from bad to worse. And if it goes from bad to worse, then we can go from bad to worse too. What if we all chose to prioritize creating great space between all of us? What then might be possible for our relationships and our families, for our workplaces, and for our world? Whenever we put something into the space, we leave some of it behind. So let's choose wisely. Thank you.